My name is Raffi Krikorian. I'm the CTO of Mozilla. For those who don't know, Mozilla exists because around 2000, one browser had 95% of the market share, and we felt that we needed to change the terms of the web, not by asking permission, but by building things. And so right now, I think a lot about what it means to rent intelligence instead of owning intelligence, or how do we get to a world of owners, not renters? So it's a values problem, it's a developer experience problem, and I feel it's a solvable problem. So I write a newsletter, I think a lot about this, and I direct the Mozilla resources in this direction.
So I'm Manos Koukoumidis, CEO at Oumi. The mission of Oumi is to enable any organization to build, own, and compound its own intelligence. So we're very thesis aligned on enterprise should be owners, not renters of the intelligence that their business runs on. So yeah, fully aligned on this.
We're all here, of course, because of a discussion that's been happening in the media recently, triggered by Satya Nadella's post on owned versus rented AI. And Satya says that a firm without control of its own learning won't remain a firm. Is that overstated, or is this the right alarm?
I do think it's the right alarm. I mean, I think that if you can't own the intelligence that powers your organization, what's really the risk? The risk, I think what Satya is saying, what the risk is that your data leaks out of the organization. So all your knowledge, whether it be your prompts, your traces, your corrections, the information you're generating, you're potentially leaking it out so other people can then monetize it against you or train their models. It's basically his point is like it's something is being taken away from you. But I think that the other question that we should be asking is sort of like this trust boundary of just like who is allowed to have access and control. So it's not just a matter of going out, but who can then turn me off? Who can actually then like cause me to go do something else? Like who can then basically cut the power to my computers, to my data center, to my organization? So I think his risk is a correct one of like he wants to prevent the risk of my business's knowledge being leaked out the door. For me, the risk is a trust one of like, can I believe that my business will even continue tomorrow because I'm allowed to use this intelligence in the first place?
First of all, fully agree with everything that Rafi said. The risk is real. I think any enterprise that remains a renter and not a builder of an owner of their own intelligence is gonna likely be falling on the wrong side of history, as also Satya was suggesting. Three reasons why for this. The first one is differentiation. If you're renting and using the same intelligence as everybody else, you're not differentiating. Your product's looking more the same as your competitors. And it's the lazy way of just staying in the shallow waters of prompting somebody else's model as opposed to building with your data, your expertise, a model that's a specialist and better quality than the frontier on the workflows, the use cases, the edge cases of your enterprise, so it can be better quality. And then keep compounding that, keep making better and better. So it becomes an asset and differentiation for you. If you don't get into that habit, you don't flex that muscle of building and compounding that differentiation, your specialist intelligence, somebody else will. And then you're going to be on the losing side. And as Rafi also said, there's the risk of your intelligence. Even if Frontier Labs say that we don't train on your data, reality is one way or another, the edge of your business, a big part of the intelligence of how your business runs and assets is leaking to them. And the other one is economics. If you're using an existing Frontier model, you have terrible economics and you're going to pay the price. Either you have to increase your prices so you can maintain your margins, and then you're going to lose the customers, or you're going to have to eat the cost. And this is not sustainable either. And the reason why I'm saying this is these Frontier models are models that are trained on gazillions of data that you actually don't need. It don't matter for your business, but you're paying the full price. I would roughly estimate that 99% of the knowledge that these models have, you don't need it, but you're paying the full cost. So you need the 1%, but you're paying 100% of it. And we've seen time and again, enterprises that build their own intelligence, they can operate models that are the same quality, if not better, and they can keep making them better at a fraction of the cost, 5 times lower cost, 10 times lower cost, even 100 times lower cost. There's one case of an enterprise that they put it on device and they save completely on the cost. So how are you going to compete with them when they have such much lower cost? And last but not least, also the thing that Rafi mentioned, which is control of key technology. If this is the intelligence that your business runs on, can you really rent it? Can you be beholden to them? And the decision to take away the model for you because of geopolitical reasons, because they started competing with you, or because they're deprecating the model, you just can't run that risk.
Back to you, Raffi. So you wrote the other day about the June 12th Anthropic shutdown, when a government order took the models offline for 19 days. And your framing was that the companies hadn't bought a product, they'd bought permission. Is that the sharpest version of the risk, or does the cost argument still move the boards faster?
Just as a recap, right, on June 12th, the government decides to flip a switch on basically everyone on the planet, or they make an order that causes Anthropic to flip the switch on everyone on the planet. And I think you're right. I think that the sharpest point of the argument is that like the government demanded for itself a guarantee because the government wanted to know that no one could then make changes on it, but that order then denied everyone access everywhere in the world. So I think that like it is a permission that you've been purchasing. I mean, it's a similar way to think about, streaming versus DVDs and stuff like that, right? Like that Netflix could choose to remove a video from their library, or a worse case than this, right? Like Amazon Kindle deletes a book from your Kindle because the licensing has changed on it all of a sudden, versus no one can delete the physical copy that I own in my house. Like they're always going to break in and actually delete it. So I think that is the sharpest way to frame it, is like you purchased permission, you purchased a license, you didn't purchase something to own. But like your point stands of just like cost is probably still the driving factor in the grand scheme of things. Like that's what causes the companies to move. You can't really have a values conversation in a system where we're trying to optimize for the bottom line. But I will say that cost, like Manos was mentioning, is moving in the favor toward open models. Like Mozilla released a state of open source AI report, and we were clocking on the order of 40 to 50x cheaper to be using open source models for fairly equivalent tasks. Like, you wouldn't drive a Ferrari to go to Whole Foods. Like you can actually get down to like the Camry or the Corolla or whatever is your favorite Honda or something like that. And so like there is a cost argument to be made. However, I will say that like cost is not the only thing you should be thinking about. Like people need to be thinking about this as a little bit as well as insurance risk. Of like if you were to think about intelligence provider the same way you would think about electricity going into your business, we all have our computers on UPSs in our data centers, right? Like effectively to provide them a huge amount of uptime. There's redundancy there. So even if cost is not causing you to fully drive over, just the notion of that my provider, my main line, my power line could be cut at any moment, and I need to still provide my like 4 nines, 5 nines of availability. The backup plan could then be one of the open models providing that backup, even if you didn't want to make that switch out of cost. So I think there's many ways to look at that problem of just like cost is a driver, but insurance could be the right metaphor as well. And yeah, we need to be thinking about how we bring these things in-house, or bring it in-house for the right problems, and figure out what are the things we need to be relying on external, and figure out the right tiering in order to pull that off.
Moving across to Manos. So you led the precursor to Gemini, Palm, to production. What was the opportunity that you saw opening up, and why did you start Oumi?
As we were discussing earlier, was the exact same reasons about why every company should be an owner, a builder and an owner of their own intelligence, not a renter, as Raffi was putting it earlier. Back when I was at Google, and we started there for a couple of months before ChatGPT came out. Even working with the early enterprise, I could see even back then, even like almost 4 years back, some of them, they would start asking for more flexibility and control. They would ask us for the weights of the model and would say, no, unfortunately, you can't have the weights. And that's when I started realizing that, as it happened with many other technology, operating system, databases, enterprises would use the closed technology or whatever technology is most accessible, easier to them, what comes out first. But when they reach that level of maturity and they say, hey, this is a technology that is critical to my success, they're going to start optimizing it. They're going to start asking for something that has the best quality, because that matters now, right? That has the best economics, and they can control it, right? Because it's so critical to your success. As Raffi said, you can't just single-handedly depend on a single provider. It's just not a risk you can take. And as history, as it was done in the past with other technology, operating system, databases, you name it, the same thing would again happen with AI. An enterprise will realize that renting and generic closed model behind an API would not be a viable path, and they would need to to own their own specialized intelligence. And the platform, I mean, for them to be able to do the transition from generic intelligence they own to specialized intelligence they own, it would not be an easy one because of the complexity of building your own specialized intelligence, the know-how that may not be ample in the industry. And that's why we set out to build a platform that would democratize the ability to build your own specialized intelligence. And that was the key motivation behind stopping to build this single large generic model and then building the platform that will enable enterprises to build and own their own.
Raffi, your argument is that the model has stopped being the story and the value has moved up the harness. Can you elaborate on this?
All your audience knows what the harness is doing. The harness is sort of that wrapper around the model itself, provides tool calling, provides some base level information, provides all the context, etc. And so one of the things that we were looking at carefully in the State of Open Source AI report was sort of like how do we think about the model and the harness as independent actors here? And Terminal Bench 2, one of the benchmarks. If you take two identical models and run them in an identical model and run it in two different agentic harnesses, you get a spread of like 20 something points, like in difference. And like we were struggling to find the right metaphor for how to do this. It's kind of like if you give a scalpel to a person off the street versus a scalpel to a surgeon. Like clearly the surgeon is going to know exactly what to do with exactly the same tools so much better. And I think we're starting to see a similar thing here when it comes to like how that agent harness and the model itself is going to work together. Now, if you believe the thesis that a lot of the model layer, the intelligence layer, is being commoditized between everyone sort of catching up to frontier level performance on like the 80% use case across open weight, open source models compared to the closed models, then the real game becomes like how do you specialize that intelligence for the domain that you actually want to go and work in. And so like we really believe, at least on the Mozilla side, that like this is now becoming a transference from a machine learning problem, which is very important. People should still continue to work on that. That is where the frontier will be pushed, whether it be protein folding, quantum computing, or whatever it might be, to a software engineering problem of like, well, then how do we harness this and tune it for the exact vertical use case that I want to go do? And that vertical use case could be split up in very, very fine ways. So like writing software for iOS might take a different harness than writing software for Python on the web. So like figuring out how to like actually do that kind of specialization, we think that that's where the compound interest is going to accrue. It's not going to accrue on the model anymore. It's going to accrue on that agentic harness side.
The next question is for both of you, but we'll start off with Manos. So the chairman of OpenAI says open models aren't cheaper because frontier models are more token efficient. So maybe it's like saying like they use fewer reasoning tokens to reach the same outcome. What's wrong with this argument? Or maybe you agree with him.
Yeah, I think it's a very convenient comment for the chairman of OpenAI to be making. There is a truth element to this, though. It is possible that for some task, an open model that may not be as capable for the specific task may struggle and may need many more tokens to reason again and again until it manages to solve the problem. And then, yeah, perhaps in the end, it may end up costing you more. But I wouldn't say this is the case for every task. But overall, this is missing the key point, which is it's comparing one general model, OpenAI's or whatever closed general model, with another open general model. The answer to this is if you want to get the token efficiency, if you want to get the dramatically lower cost, not the 10 or 20%, but the I don't know, even 10x lower cost, is to use the right tool for the job. You don't use the biggest sledgehammer you want to push a little nail through the wall. You don't use, as I tell people, the biggest Swiss knife possible when you want to do a surgery. You use the scalpel, which is the efficient, the right tool, and precise tool to use. Because if you compare the economics of a general purpose closed model with a specialized, an open model, you have specialized the task, then no, usually typically those models are not 10 or 20%, but again, 5x, 10x, or even 100x cheaper to run. I think that's the thing we should be comparing. Something that's a black box and you can't change, or you can just prompt around it, or maybe just build a harness around it, with something that is open source, open weights to be more precise, and you can fully specialize.
Over to you, Raffi. Do you agree or disagree with this argument?
Obviously be more spicy if I disagreed, but like I think that like you're exactly right. I mean, the problem is that the measurement is rigged in the grand scheme of things. So like token efficiency only matters if you live in a world where you're paying by the token. And so like, if you're actually like if you want to just completely reframe the question, we shouldn't be thinking about the cost per token. We should be being like cost per impact or cost per task. And if you look at it through that metric, then like again, like what Manos was saying, what we saw in State of Open Source AI report is just like it is vastly cheaper to be using these open source models, like sometimes 25 to 50x. So therefore, you could take 25 to 50x more tokens and still be cheaper than the frontier models and getting the job done. And again, wrapped in the right harness and things like that, we can actually still manage to eke out a lot more efficiency there. So I think like we're just like I think Brett is just giving a convenient measurement that sort of benefits what his argument is. And also on top of that, we did an experiment. I actually wrote about this just this week. We did an experiment where we swapped out Opus for Kimi inside of Claude Code, and on the same tasks, like Claude Code plus Kimi was actually more token efficient than Claude Code plus Anthropic. So I think that like this is just not the right measurement. What we should be asking instead is like effectively the TCO of getting the job done. And the TCO of getting the job done, sure, we're going to have an OPEX versus CAPEX question. We might have to stand up some GPUs, but at the scale of tasks, those lines are going to cross, and they're going to cross in the favor of the people that can actually burn power instead of burning dollars per token, like kind of thing. I think about it the exact same the way we thought about cloud, right? Like for a long time, people thought about self-hosting. Then cloud showed up. It became really easy to move into cloud. And then multi-cloud showed up, and then the tooling got really good. Like no one writes to a single cloud provider. You use Terraform or something that allows you to bounce between them. Like we're going through that same evolution right now when it comes to open source and open weights models of like options are showing up, tooling is showing up, it needs to get better. We're going through this developer cycle. The confusing thing that most developers they're facing is that like at the same time they're getting like marketing blitz by the closed labs. So like they're it's just a confusing information ecosystem that we're working in. And so like the tooling is starting to show up. It's not perfect. We need more people to be contributing. It has to go through the Linux and LAMP stack moments in order to be really usable. And it's possible. We just need to like actually tend to it and give it time. And it's the information ecosystem we're all operating in is a little confusing.
Yeah, I would say overall the whole process end to end of building your own specialized intelligence, so you can move away from just calling that closed model API and using a model that you have built specialized to your task, it takes significant amount of expertise, and it's also tedious at many points. That's why after what Raffi said, I got inspired, and the way I may start presenting Oumi is that we have rounded the corners of AI model development. So because I think it's exactly what you said. I mean, the reasons why building your own specialized AI, owning your own AI hasn't taken off was two things. One is the marketing blitz, the complete brainwashing by the closed model providers. Hey, if you don't use our models, you're going to be left behind. I've heard that from C-level exec of one of the biggest banks, which, by the way, now they're starting to say the opposite. Hey, we have realized we need to build and own our own intelligence. But then, as you mentioned, that's exactly the problem. It's the whole process is hard. Everything from evaluations to figure out how can you robustly evaluate the quality of a model and thoroughly. And then, okay, you see hundreds of cases that have failed in evaluation, but how can you start understand what are the root cause? What is the underlying patterns of why the model is failing? How can you build the right data to improve? There's so many different training algorithms and hyperparameters to tune. I mean, just the whole process of evaluations, curating the right data, training, and then repeating again and again and again. That process takes tremendous amount of effort and expertise. And not to mention what also was mentioned to us before, as Rafi said, that hey, we tried this before. Open source was highly chaotic, and we stopped. We didn't know how to progress. That's why I think the best way to enable the ecosystem to move towards special intelligence they own is to fix that tooling. I think the mindset is changing. People are realizing, they're coming out of that brainwashing cycle. They're starting to realize more and more that this is the right strategy for them. Now it's the tooling, the things that needs to catch up. And that's why that's actually our thesis at Oumi, that we need to make the process of developing your own AI easier. And there's no better way to make it easier by using AI itself. If we use Claude Code to automate software development and we make it so much better that there's no going back, why not do the same for AI model development? AI model development is a more tedious task, a task that is easier to automate or get the help of AI to help you execute on. And that's what we did. And I think it will be the thing that will unlock the wave of enterprises to go build their own specialist intelligence.
Final question. What should an enterprise CTO or similar role do on Monday morning after reading Nadella's essay?
The smallest possible thing you can go do is prepare to switch. You don't actually have to switch, but like you should figure out like what's the one critical workload and like really kind of understand it, right? Like to Manos's point, like figure out how to eval it, figure out how to trace it, figure out like what it would mean, beta test it against a different model. Like right now, we live under an existential threat that like any model that you're running from a commercial provider could literally be shut off at a moment's notice. So the smallest possible thing you should do is like at least have a backup plan. So to create that backup plan is like find a critical workload, start testing it. Start testing it under different models. Every model behaves slightly differently. Every harness behaves slightly differently. Understand what that difference looks like. Start figuring out what would failover look like. Start figuring out how you would cut over if you really had to. Like if I were in that position, I'm not running a critical workloads, Mozilla, we build desktop software, not necessarily backend software, but like that's the thing I would be doing right now is like what is my run book and what is my backup plan if like this were to actually happen today. Now the best thing you could do is actually really start thinking about tiering your software, tiering your system, figuring out which workloads you can start moving over, get some of that 50x of cost efficiency, like figure out like what are truly needs of the frontier, etc. But the smallest thing you can do is like figure out your run book for when some things actually hit the fan.
First of all, definitely what Raffi said. They should build that rulebook, playbook, their failover plan, because the risk could happen anytime, and the impact of that risk could be too high for any enterprise to take. The second one is maybe to add to what Raffi said, because I have nothing to add there. I think he fully covered it. Is they need to start defining the strategy for their organization to say, okay, we have a failover plan, right, for what we have already built, or at least some quick way if a problem happens next day. But strategically, we need to move from, again, just renting our intelligence to building and specializing our own intelligence for these reasons that we discussed before: differentiation, economics, control of key technology, and define the plan for the organization, both the strategy, right, but also the plan for how the organization can go operationalize on this. But the key thing also when they do this, when they operationalize how they can build and own their own specialized intelligence, is to do it also in the way that Raffi mentioned before, which is in a way that has a failover. In a way that also Satya put in his post, in his X post, is that you have the optionality, the flexibility, you don't have the lock-in. Because it's the same, right? You can use a platform, something to build your own intelligence, but if that platform locks you in and you're stuck using it, you start having a very similar problem.
So it sounds like there's just so much we can start doing right now to really like be prepared for this risk. Any final thoughts or any closing remarks before we conclude the panel?
It's not, I mean, renters versus owners is like a really good, quick take on it. But like, I think what it really comes down to is choice. Like organizations just need to maintain choice and optionality, and open gives you that ability to have the choice. Only having closed means you are under someone else's choice. It's not your choice anymore.
You need to have control over your destiny for what matters for you or what your enterprise runs on. So you need the flexibility, you need the control, and if you need also the differentiation, it's something that you need to build and specialize for your business, not just something that was built for everybody and optimized for no one.
Thanks, Raffi and Manos. Really fantastic panel discussion. Lots of insights there. Hopefully, you can join us again soon.